she's sweet but a psycho, a little bit psycho. At night she's screaming, I'm on my mind. Oh.
I got it. All right, we are recording now. We won't pretend like we haven't been chatting for a minute. Hi. Okay. Hi, Sheila.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you for putting up with our 20 minutes of shenanigans. It doesn't normally go that long. But when we have fun, we have fun. All right, I'm going to pull up my questions. I apologize if there's any children you've heard in the background. I'm going to try to mute myself as often as I can with them screaming.
Okay.
All right, so Sheila, biggest question everyone always wants to know.
Yes.
What is the inspiration behind your story? What brought you to write this book? Why did you pick Red Riding Hood was another one. So if that's part of this answer.
Yeah. So I have always been really into fairy tales. When I was a kid, we had this Grimm's fairy tales, but like a much nicer illustrated version of it. It was clearly designed for children. And I was really obsessed with that. And we had a similar King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table one that I read a lot too. And they were this very similar vibes. But I was always really into Red Riding Hood. I don't know what it was about it. I think because the story is, there's a lot of fairy tales where there's sort of like an element of magic or disbelief. But I think the thing that always struck me about like the traditional Red Riding Hood tale is that he eats the grandmother, and you're like, wolves aren't that big. Like, first of all, like to eat an entire person at once is a lot. And he eats, in the original fairy tale, he eats the grandmother and her. And then the hunter comes and saves them. But I was like, what are we supposed to be learning from this? And I think I was always kind of like stuck on it because, for a lot of reasons, I was like, I have so many questions whenever I think about this fairy tale, which are like, who's letting a little kid walk in the woods to like deliver stuff to their grandmother? Like, this doesn't really feel like the best idea generally. Like, where, like, why the wolf? Like, why is that the scary thing? And I started kind of doing research and going all the way back to Red Riding Hood exists in almost every culture around the world. So it's very hard to tell where exactly it originated from. But as usual, the Greeks are great documentarians. And so there is a Greek myth about, it's called Pyra, a woman named Pyra who has red hair, and a death god who appears in the form of a wolf, and this village who sacrifices her to this death god. And of course, because it's a Greek myth, and if you're familiar at all with how those tend to go, in the original story, she is sacrificed to the death god. This huntsman comes and saves her. And then, of course, because he saved her, he gets to have her. I was like, wait a second. I hate this. First of all, like, why is this always the reward? Why can't she like keep herself? And I had like, then I just had more questions where I was like, why are they like, how did they get into this deal with the death god? Why does he look like a wolf? Why are people like cool with just like sacrificing a girl from the village? And how do they decide? Like, do you just get like the short straw when you come of age? Like, yikes, you know, like, is it like, oh, the season's up, like summer's here, bye, good luck, you know?
Weak of them to just sacrifice people.
I know. Well, I was like, this is just like such an interesting story. And so a lot of the idea of the story was sort of born out of that, but some of it was also born out of actual history, because I took a lot of inspiration from the rise of Christianity in pagan Ireland. My family's from Ireland, and growing up, you know, I kind of got to see and like learn about some of that influence in the culture through things like Saint Bridget, who was originally goddess Bridget, and the way that some things were sort of like absorbed into Christianity to sort of make it more palatable to people who had what they considered to be like more polytheistic and less acceptable beliefs. And so I was kind of fascinated by that. And then also I come from a line of mediums. And so I always wanted to write a book about a girl who sees ghosts and what that's like. And it's actually like a really small part of this book considering, but I knew that I wanted to have sort of that gateway between life and death. And I was thinking a lot about liminal spaces and what it would look like and what exactly she would be trying to deliver on. And then obviously I had some feelings about things that were happening in contemporary society in terms of women's rights and how comfortable people are sort of like chipping away at them when it doesn't affect them personally, and sort of looking at different types of evil. There's kind of, the evil that looks evil, the evil that looks good, and then the evil of apathy, which is sort of like the question that I asked from the very beginning is like, why are all these people cool sacrificing a girl to a death god? And how does that become normal? Because when you say it outright now, you're like, we would never sacrifice a person. But, societally, there's a lot of things happening right now about what we consider to be an acceptable loss. And so I think I was processing a lot of anger when I wrote this book.
Well, I think it came across in the book. And in a way, I think a lot of us identify with and find parallels with. And it was never I didn't have any moments, and I don't think anyone did, and at least in our chat, any moments where I was like, none of this makes sense. I wouldn't see any of this happening. It was like at some point in history, you could be like, yeah, that, if it's not as severe now as it may have been in Grecian times when they actually did sacrifice someone on an altar, it's there. And we all joke about Handmaid's Tale, but it feels so real sometimes. So like just having that whole idea in the book was so compelling for me as a reader, and I think for most of us, especially since I believe the majority of our readers are female and identifying as female and working with that kind of strife in the world at the moment. It just really hit true. And what I like about what you did with that is that you have made us ask a lot of questions, a lot of like, ooh, that does feel wrong and icky, but you're right. I mean, even down to like Finn, down to like where you're like, oh, but he's beautiful and wonderful and he loves her and he's strong and a knight. Isn't he perfect? No.
Yeah, I really have a thing for the fake nice guy. Like it makes me so mad. Just like known too many of them,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
I think probably what's most insidious about Finn was that he genuinely thought he was doing the right thing and coming from a good place.
Yeah.
But he just didn't know how to listen to Rowan.
And I think that kind of mirrored the townspeople or the villagers, with like you wanted Finn to go on a journey of acceptance and finally catching this and finally like making that change and noticing. And I don't know that his arc was completed in the way that I wanted it to, but that felt right for the story. Like it felt Finn wasn't going to get there. He's just a dumb boy, and that's just the way it is. And you have to be cool with it.
Even things like her knowing that if she came back and told them something from the wolf that was in that contradicted what they think, they wouldn't believe her. Like she's like, they won't believe me either. It doesn't really matter.
But then she wouldn't tell him. You made it so she wouldn't confide in Connor those things. And I was like, damn.
I thought you really brought that point across really well, that it was just ingrained in her that nobody would listen to her, because the town was taught that nobody would listen to women.
Yeah.
That their voice just didn't matter.
And there was-
Especially the
her
maidens.
voice.
There was like
Especially her voice.
a semblance too in there, like you were saying, Laura, of like she also felt as though she didn't need to fill that space. And that is like, if that's not the lady experience in our current society, holy shit. That you aren't allowed to take up that space and no one will believe you, so don't come forward. Is like,
and feeling the need to apologize before everything you say or do.
Yeah, and even when he does find out, he doesn't listen to her either. And then she's pissed. But it's the first time that she is actually pissed at a person and tells them. Like in the whole story, she, before that, other than like Cade, who doesn't really count, but she tells him, don't, because it's just going to make a mess. And she knows that it's going to make a mess. And then he does it anyway. And when she comes back, she's so angry at him. And I like writing that scene was really important because it's the first time you really see her and like act on that. And it's kind of the first sign that she feels like, even though this is supposed to be the least safe space, it feels safe enough for her to be angry. And I think that was a really important part of the story for me with the two of them, is that she is very angry, but there's no place for her to be allowed to be angry. And no one has made a safe place for it until he does.
Is that what you were expecting, like the altars to be?
Sort of. So I think like their relationship is so complicated because he has killed a bunch of people. Maybe not people that she knows personally, but that's also part of it too. I mean, I feel like that's kind of in this whole conversation that we're having, is who can learn to think differently, or who can learn to change and who can't, and like is happy with things staying the way that they are. And I think he had already kind of made that pivot. He tried not to with, oh God, am I going to get the names of my own characters wrong? Evelyn, is that it?
Evelyn.
And Lorna and Orla, but like other things happened then that sort of affected the narrative. And he's not a good guy. I mean, he is and he isn't. He's very in some ways he is, but he is a complicated character, and I loved writing Connor. He's a lot of fun to write. He's so grumpy.
I really like that. I really like that he has the morality of someone who is not mortal, who's not human.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't see right and wrong, black and white, the way humans do. The laws of society just don't apply to him, and he does whatever he thinks is right and whatever he wants to.
Yeah.
But that also makes sense for his art, that it took him a long time. It almost feels more genuine, his transition, because he's had so long, speaking to like his immortality, that I could buy it more easily than if it were like 3 ladies ago, or I guess it was 3 ladies ago, but like it was just like he'd had 5 opportunities and he decided halfway through, like he had a long time to come to grips with it. And I thought that made it more genuine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if you were like stuck living forever, a certain amount of apathy is going to come in at some point, and just
good. It didn't seem to for the other lady. The goddess.
She's the eye of the tiger, okay? She is a woman and she's focused.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So at a conference I went to, there was a panel where authors were speaking to how readers have a tendency to forgive men much more easily than they do women. And so your female character leads have to be a certain type in order to be likable or believed. or to have people want to read it. And I thought that was such a shame that we have to typecast the women in a particular way in order for people to really want to read the book. Because I felt like although Rowan wasn't somebody who was unlikable, she wasn't a typical assassin 18,
Yeah.
running from my mom and my dad kind of person. And so I would like to know a little bit more about, like, I know you've written quite a few books, and this meeting is about this book, but what has been your journey when it comes to writing women versus men, when it comes to making the decisions with that in mind?
Oh my God, I love this question. I have such strong feelings about how people talk about female main characters in particular. One of the things that I've learned, I read tarot for a really long time and professionally, and so I read for a lot of clients. And one of the things that I learned during all of that time is how much human beings contradict themselves. And I think that when we read books, sometimes we have this idea that a character is going to act rationally. And when they don't act rationally, we think that they're immature, or, immature is like probably like the number one thing I see about female
Is
main
that a
characters.
trigger word for you?
Yeah, it makes me so crazy. But I think that there is a sense of, first of all, the entire definition of what's rational has pretty much been decided by men and the patriarchy in general. And so I kind of butt up against that a little bit. It annoys me. And also, I think that there is an element of like when it comes to rationality, first of all, we're talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about if you're kind of always on the end of having to think about everybody else and doing a lot of like emotional labor on a regular basis and thinking about how your kids feel and how your husband feels and how your boss feels and how this coworker is going to feel. And like you're taking on a lot of emotional labor. So when you have a moment where you're short with somebody, it might seem irrational, but if you looked at the entire scope of something, it's actually very rational. And I think often what I see when people talk about these characters is if they don't move in a direct linear way where they're making progress toward the goal, if they make mistakes, if they are sort of the unforgivable things seem to be if they make a bad decision because of a man, which frankly, we all have girlfriends, and also like who hasn't, who here hasn't, even a family member, like it doesn't have to be a romantic bad decision, but like, and so part of it I think is that, and then part of it is the Barbie movie monologue where it's just like, you have to be like the exact right way. So my female main character from the Lost God series, Cece, is very soft. And I wrote her specifically that way because I did read all of these books with like these super badass, unaffected characters, and I love them. Like I love those characters, but I'm not them. Like I'm very sensitive. I get my feelings hurt all the time. And I really wanted to write somebody who was really sensitive, but people will say often that they kind of equate emotionality with immaturity. And I think that is a problem, a larger societal problem about how we view expression of emotions and vulnerability. But I really like to challenge some of those things with these characters. And I think especially with Rowan, it took me a while to kind of figure her out, because I do think when you live under such an oppressive cultish religion like that, where you don't really have any space to have a personality or to share things about yourself or to really have interests and stuff, like Connor keeps trying to get her to answer these questions and she doesn't know how to answer them because she's never really had any kind of agency. And I think getting to see her learn to push outside of her comfort zone, which is being sort of neutral, externally at least, and to start to express some of that stuff that had been bubbling up, I think it was a lot of fun to do. But I don't like to write the sort of one-dimensional, this character is just like a badass. And she does have her moments where she's really like really feeling something, you know, and overwhelmed. And I do think that, and then on the other side of it, I see, you know, Connor basically gets to do whatever he wants. Even in, I'll never forget that I was tagged in a review early on for my other series, and there is a character in that series who's very charming, but he does some stuff wrong in the first book. And I'll never forget that I got tagged in a review that said he deserved better. And I was like,
Whoa.
excuse me. Because if you pull apart like what he has actually done in that book, I'm like, does he? Like, absolutely not. I know Sarah's shaking her head because she knows what I'm talking about. And I was like, okay. I was like, we've got a problem here. But I do think that I've seen some interesting things like that. And I actually have paid a lot of attention to it because, as my critique partner Liz says, my books are becoming slowly more feral as time goes by, as are my female main characters. And I actually did a bunch of research on how to write like an anti-heroine, because there are things that aren't acceptable. And one of the things that I learned, I was listening to the Fated Mates podcast, in case anybody is interested. They did an episode on anti-heroines in romance, and they were talking about how in order for a female character to be sort of like morally gray and to sort of like be out of the expectations of a typical FMC, she has to have a reason for it. And you have to reveal it pretty much in the first 10%. And if you don't, then people just don't like her and like won't get on board with her journey. But they will go the literal entire book, or sometimes like an entire series, without knowing why the male character is the way he is. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, I know this is true, but it makes me so angry. And so I really tried to think about duality in a lot of my characters, because I don't really believe that either, that like characters should be all bad or all good. You know, like I think it's much more interesting when they have a little bit of everything. I think Kate is like a good example, you know. Well,
I was gonna speak to how so in Act 3, every page was like, where is she gonna take this? What is she gonna do? Because is she gonna make Rowan not kill everybody? I don't know. Is there going to be blood on everything? I don't know. Where is this going to, because it was every page was like this is awesome. Like I expected her to not murder everybody. And then I was like, she did it?
I have to say, I like pulled back on that scene a little bit because my one critique partner was like, whoa. She was like, this went really off the rails really quickly.
Sheila, we always talk about how sometimes you read a therapy book and you're like, this is the author's therapy book.
Yeah, she was like, maybe not this much murder. Like, maybe I took it down a little bit.
You had a little wishful thinking.
You did just kill a child. Like, no, don't come for me. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think the book will be wildly successful. It already is wildly successful, but even more so because it mirrors so much of our own experience and what we would like to happen, or the voice we would like to have, or the experience we would like to inflict if we were in a village and made of magic and able to slaughter a town. Yeah. I just think that's where we would want to go, and that's the future. And if you don't like it, suck it up. I really think that's the truth. Because when you had her kill her, I had to sit for a second. When you had her murder everybody, and I was like, is this on brand? And I was like, I don't hate it. I love it so much. And I'm going to keep on going. Because you had me cry with child murder, and you had us all upset. Everybody gifting in our little chat, like, of course I'm going to read it all. So I read it all, but I wasn't super surprised, but I was also super surprised. It was just always one of those where I was like, oh my gosh, she took it there. And I loved it. I thought it was fabulous. I love that it was unpredictable and super interesting and different. And I've told everyone I know about it. I think all of us have.
Yeah.
So we don't have a ton of time for if anyone else has a burning, but if you have a burning question, what's your burning question? If there's anybody in our audience today that wants to ask. Ooh. Someone has raised a hand. Revan has raised a hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. So I actually have two questions. I know you hate Finn, Um,
I love him. He's my baby, but you know,
Yes.
he represents a thing I hate.
yeah. So then my question was, one of my questions was, what became of him after the series? Because the last we saw was that he got knocked out by the goddess, and then he just disappeared. He didn't show back up again in the epilogue or any of the bonus chapters or anything.
We don't care about him.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. He
We want
had
him
a
to be with
big
that hot
developmental
chick.
moment.
Whoever that lord lady
Boy.
go somewhere else. Be somewhere else.
Um, and then my other question was, how did Rowan handle ferrying Aoife?
Oh yeah. In my head, Charlie did that one. Because he can do like an individual one. And that's what Connor told her about Elder Garrett, that he would take care of that so she didn't have to deal with it.
Right.
Oh, that's your question too, Sarah. Yeah, so in my brain, that's how it worked. And in terms of Finn, I left that intentionally vague because I do have 2 other books that are both standalones that are going to be in this world, and I wasn't quite sure who I was going to use for different parts of them. I've a more solid idea now than I did then. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Okay.
I did forget to ask you, Sheila. Everyone wanted to know why about your magic system and the music magic, and I apologize for not asking.
Yeah. So I am a classically trained singer. I've always been really into music, but also for me, a lot of what I sense and everything like spirity that I sense is always very sound based. So I hear things a lot. Not actually hearing them, just to be clear, but it sort of like comes in as if I'm hearing it. Or like when I was a kid, I would say I was listening to the sound of the air to hear who was home in my house or to hear who was coming upstairs next, because I knew what everyone in my family sounded like, but I'm hearing like their energy or whatever. And so a lot of what went into the magic system in this is, I think, kind of born out of that, and having this kind of sense of resonance in everything, especially when it came to the plants, and when she's sort of like humming these songs to the plants and singing them out loud so Connor can hear them, and he doesn't hear it like she does. Like, he is like very fascinated by that because he is obviously into music, but it's sort of like a sense that he doesn't have. And so I kind of knew that I wanted that to play in, and also that he would be sort of like the quiet place for her, because he doesn't sound like anything to her. And he's like the only person who doesn't. Everybody else has some sort of like signature, which is how people are to me too. So like I could tell if I get home and I don't know that my fiance has someone here, I can tell like right away. As soon as I, like, even before hearing anything, I walk into the house and I'm like, oh, that something's weird. Like, someone else is here.
I feel like I'm learning so much about myself. I didn't know was a thing. I just thought it was like intuition. I didn't know it was like a hearing the air.
Yeah, well, it's like a sense. It's one sense of intuition. It just happens to be like my strongest one.
That's so interesting, because when the house is empty, I know, like, I don't even have to open the door. Like, you're so right that everyone has different energies that way.
Yeah, and women have more of a sense of it for safety reasons, which a lot of people are like, I'm not intuitive. And I'm like, no, all women are intuitive, because all of us have that thing that like the like danger thing. That's the strongest one. So all of us have that one down pat. And that's sort of like where it starts. So wherever it happens, when you feel that danger thing, that like something wrong thing, that's usually where it is otherwise too. And for me, my ears will ring like a lot of the time. So
would that be what we refer to as empaths?
Yeah. So a lot of it's empath, and I would call that clairaudience, like when you're hearing. So
Well, I mean, you have casually touched on so much I really want to talk about. I mean, you're a medium. We just threw that out there. That's no big deal.
Very casual.
No one cares about that. That's just what it is. And that you hear everything. I mean, that's fine. I might just DM you and talk to you about
Yeah, no, that's
Wait,
fine.
no, I want to be part of that.
I mean, if anyone wants to hang out after Sheila has time. But we have our giveaway we're supposed to do, and then Sheila,
Yeah.
you're supposed to be asking us questions.
Oh gosh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. And I saw the question in the chat about tarot cards. I don't have any plans, but I would love to do a tarot deck at some
I
point.
want to make a tarot deck so
That would
bad.
be so cool.
I will do that as fan art for you if you want to do that with me, Sheila, because I want to make a tarot deck badly.
Gosh.
Oh my gosh, I want to. That would be so much fun. Anyway, yes, I'll put in. Everyone put a number in the giveaway, and then Sheila, you can ask a question.
Oh, okay. What was I going to ask?
We have 2 3s in the chat, and by the way,
Okay. What kind of magic of all the magic in the book, which one would you want the most? Like, would you want Connor's or Sarai's or Rowan's or Aoife's or Orla's, which we only kind of hear about from her journal, but is there? It's for the gossipers.
I think we're all a musical bunch. We're probably gonna pick Rowan's. Hi, Ron.
Yeah, definitely Rowan.
Rowan.
It's just so cool.
I already sing to my plants. They don't respond the same, but I do.
I do too. I know. I wish they would grow the way that hers do.
Can you describe? I know you were asking questions, but I'm just thinking back to like some of our chats. We were all kind of interested in Cade a little bit more. Am I right? Did you describe it once as more like a childlike figure? Is he like a grown figure?
He grows with her. So when
Okay.
they first met, she thought he was just another kid, and he's sort of like grown up with her. I think I don't ever directly address it in the book. This is like one of those things where I'm like, wow, I never actually said this, and I should have. But he sort of like grows up with her. So even though she finds out that he's not a real kid when she's 5 or whatever, as she grows up, he sort of like stays on the same level with her, so that they're sort of peers. But he is obviously also much older. Like, in reality, he just appears to be about her age.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
That's so cool.
Which will become relevant in a future story.
Oh, so excited. Can't wait.
So excited for that.
The way we devoured those chapters.
Oh my god.
We were like drunken college students at 3 a.m. eating tacos. I can't even. They're like, tacos? Where are tacos? Where are the chapters? Let me in.
Poor Sheila, I messaged her and I was like, give them to me. I'm so bad.
I'm so excited. I had like, my brain was like not cooperating. It was like very stuck on book 3. And I was like, no, I need you to be on book 2, because even though it's not a contiguous series, there is a through line from Song through the 3rd book. Sort of like, if anybody reads interconnected romances, there's usually some sense of like, here is where we start, and this is like the payoff for reading like through the whole thing. So the 3rd book is very connected to this one. And so I was like, okay, so I think that's why I was getting a lot of the plot and stuff. And I was like, no, I need book 2 first. Like, I know that this other thing needs to happen first. So yeah.
Oh, I'm excited to read it. If you're excited to write it, oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'm very excited.
Great.
Very excited. Okay, so let's talk about this raffle. So we have this beautiful book box. We have I'll bring it out.
We haven't seen it. I'm sorry.
We have a signed copy provided by Sheila. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome.
We have tea from Cliche Teas. They are book tropes. We have a candle from Apothecary 19. These smell absolutely amazing. And we have a handmade bracelets This was made specifically for the book, so it says
Love.
Seduce the Wolf. These are so fun. I love them. And that was by Jay of All Trades. And then we have a bookmark that was also made for the book.
That's so pretty.
And this was by Brown Sugar and Sass. And look how gorgeous that is.
Barry Connor.
Right. Okay, so let's see who won. The number 9. So that
Allison.
is Allison.
Yay!
Yay! Awesome. Thanks. Exciting.
I love it.
Oh, let me write down Allison's name for you, Laura.
Yes, thank you.
We always end up, who was it? Can someone go there?
Oh my gosh. This was so great. Thank you so much for having me.
It was awesome to
so
have you
fun.
here. We had a pretty deep conversation. I don't feel like we touched on very light things today.
That's okay. I'm very much used to it. It's no
I
problem.
had plans for a fuck, marry, kill. I needed to save the day.
Oh my gosh.
I wasn't sure we would need it. But we did have some very deep conversation today. I mean, the book is deep. It makes sense.
I love it. I'm so glad that everybody enjoyed it so much. And I also think that for me, it's always about people relating to my books. Like it's great to, be on Bookstagram and whatever. And obviously I would like to make it a career. So it would be great to also make money. But I think the thing that always lands the most with me is people relating to the characters. I'm a super character driven author. And I think when people, especially with this book in particular, I think because as you discussed, I was pretty mad when I was writing it. And so I think having other people relate to it, and the same thing happened when the Lost God series came out. I think I kind of underestimated as a writer how healing it would be to have people relate to experiences that I've had and that I'm sort of like processing through writing. I never really anticipated how much writing fiction would be like emotional processing. I thought that was just like what memoirs and like poetry and stuff were for. And then I started writing The Lost God and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm really writing about all of my relationship stuff. Like I feel like I'm like really dumping a lot of old relationship stuff in here.
Well, then that's how we all relate to it. Apparently none of us are particularly unique. When it
Right.
No, but I think it's like different parts of the story and stuff too, which I like. It makes me really happy, and I think this one in particular, I've gotten a lot of messages about, especially for people who have had that like experience of feeling very stifled, and I like that makes me happy. I really want people to like find their voice, like along with Rowan. It's a journey for her, but I think it is for a lot of us too, and. I'm almost 40 now, and I feel like I've learned a lot about, I feel like I'm processing my 20s now. Like I have a little more like distance from it, and I'm able to talk about it with a little more distance. And so I think like the Lost God series and this book are both sort of like processing out of a lot of the stuff that we kind of go through in this kind of like second or third coming of age of really like learning who you are as a person and who you want to be. So
I loved it. I thought it was fabulous.
thank you guys so much for having me.
It was awesome to have you
So
here.
good.
Yeah.
Yay.
And thank you for helping us put together our giveaway box and everything.
Yeah, and my DMs are always open if anybody has questions or wants to hear about things or
You like gushing? Can we just like gush?
yes, yeah, and
I mean, like, be careful what you offer because I have so many questions.
no, I'm always happy to answer questions. I think like a lot of people are always like, oh, I don't want to bother you, and I'm like, I don't think you understand that authors have spent like sometimes years working on something and sitting in our house being like, is anybody even going to read this? Is anybody going to ask me things about it? Does anybody care? So I promise for me, especially, but for most of the authors I know, they're always delighted to have questions and get tagged in things and see like all kinds of unhinged videos and stuff, like totally here for it.
Yeah, like that's part of why I'm like, okay, I'll take you up on that, because like I've been writing and creating characters since I was like 13,
Okay.
so like 20 years now.
Yeah.
And I love when people ask me about my characters. It's my favorite thing. I'm like, okay, you're my new best friend. I hope you don't have any plans, because I'm going to talk your ear off for 5 hours.
No, I love it. I love it. And it's been very funny too, because Isabella McMurray did the art of Connor, and we collaborated on the post about it. And she was like, wow, I really underestimated the thirst. And I was like, I should have warned you that I have some very thirsty readers.
Yeah, that picture got passed around a lot.
I tried to warn everybody. She sent it to me, and I was like, oh my God.
It was like posted and reposted, and everyone's like, in case you forgot what Connor looks like.
Looks like
Yeah, I remember at one point I was like, have you guys seen the art for Connor? And someone was like, no, what? And I posted it, and they were like, oh my God.
I need to share it way more. So, so yeah. So thank you so much.
Well,
for
thank
having
you
me.
so much. Have an awesome night, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, she's sweet but a psycho, a little bit psycho. At night she's screaming, I'm on my mind,